A black cleaning woman fell asleep in a billionaire's chair. 5 hours later, she woke up to find him standing over her, silent, unblinking, watching her like she was a stain on his perfect world. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been with this channel for a while now. Your support means everything, and it's the reason I get to keep sharing stories like this one. If you're new here, welcome to the family. Now, let's get back to the story. Kara Banks hadn't slept more than 3 hours in 4 days. She stood at the bus stop in the gray light before dawn, her body swaying slightly as exhaustion pulled at her bones. The coffee in her thermos had gone cold hours ago, but she drank it anyway, grimacing at the bitter taste. It was the cheap instant kind, the only thing she could afford after rent, groceries, and her mother's medication took everything else. The bus groaned to a stop, and Kara climbed aboard, finding her usual seat near the back. She pressed her forehead against the cool window and watched the city blur past. In 6 hours, she would finish her shift at the hotel. Then she would clock in at the grocery store for another 6. And tonight, she would take the night shift at Castellano Tower, the job that paid triple the others combined. Triple pay meant triple rules. No talking, no touching anything unnecessary, no sitting down, and absolutely, under no circumstances, was anyone allowed in the private quarters on the top floor without explicit permission. Kara didn't care about the rules, she cared about the money. Every dollar went straight to Mercy General Hospital, where her mother lay in a bed that cost more per night than Kara earned in a week. Gloria Banks had raised Kara alone. She had worked double shifts as a nurse for 30 years, and now cancer was eating her from the inside out. Stage 4. Terminal. The insurance company had stopped covering treatments 2 months ago, calling them not medically necessary. As if her mother's life was a line item to be crossed off a budget. Kara had done the math. Without treatment, her mother had weeks. With treatment, maybe months. Either way, time was running out, and Kara was losing. By the time she arrived at Castellano Tower that night, her hands were shaking from exhaustion. She had forgotten her thermos at the grocery store, and the vending machine coffee had done nothing to cut through the fog in her brain. 20 hours awake, maybe 22. She had stopped counting. The tower rose 40 floors into the Manhattan skyline, all glass and steel and cold precision. Kara had heard stories about the man who owned it, Carlos Castellano, the real estate billionaire who never shook hands, never attended his own parties, and fired people for leaving fingerprints on doorknobs. She had never seen him. None of the night shift workers had. He was more myth than man, a shadow that moved through the building after everyone else was gone. Kara signed in at the security desk and took the service elevator to the top floor. The penthouse, the forbidden zone. She was only supposed to clean the hallway and the private office, and only between 2 and 5 in the morning, when the owner was guaranteed to be away. The hallway was immaculate, as always. Kara ran her cloth over surfaces that were already spotless, her movements mechanical, her mind drifting. She thought about her mother's smile, about the way Gloria used to sing while she cooked, about all the things Kara would never hear again once the hospital bills finally buried them both. She pushed open the door to the private office and stepped inside. The room was massive, all dark wood and leather and windows that looked out over the city like it was something to be conquered. In the center sat a desk that probably cost more than Kara's entire apartment building, and behind the desk, facing the window, was a chair. It was black leather, perfectly positioned, catching the faint glow of the city lights. It looked impossibly soft, impossibly inviting. Kara knew she shouldn't. The rules were clear. No one sat in that chair. No one even touched it. But her legs were giving out. Her vision was blurring, and the chair was right there, promising just a moment of rest. 5 minutes, she told herself. Just 5 minutes, and then she would get up and finish her shift. No one would ever know. She sank into the leather, and the world went dark. Carlos Castellanos' flight landed 3 hours early. The red-eye from London had been a disaster. Turbulence, delays, a first-class passenger who kept coughing without covering his mouth. By the time Carlos stepped off the plane, his skin was crawling with the need to shower, to change, to restore order to his disrupted routine. His driver was waiting at the curb. Carlos didn't acknowledge him, he never did, but slid into the back seat and pulled out his phone. 17 emails, 4 missed calls from his assistant. A reminder about a board meeting he had no intention of attending. He deleted everything. The city was quiet at 5 in the morning, the streets empty except for garbage trucks and early commuters. Carlos watched the buildings pass without seeing them. His mind was already in his office, calculating the exact sequence of tasks he would complete before the sun came up. Shower, change. Coffee at precisely 6:15, review the quarterly reports, sign the merger documents, control, routine, order. These were the things that kept the chaos at bay. The elevator took him straight to the penthouse. He stepped out into the hallway, noting with satisfaction that every surface gleamed under the recessed lighting. The cleaning crew had done their job. Good. He pushed open the door to his office and stopped. Someone was in his chair. A woman. Black, young, wearing a cleaning uniform. Her head was tilted back, her lips slightly parted, her chest rising and falling with the deep rhythm of sleep. She was sitting in his chair, sleeping, in his chair. Carlos's heart began to pound. His hands clenched at his sides. The familiar pressure built behind his eyes, the one that signaled the beginning of an episode. Someone had touched his things. Someone had violated his space. Someone had broken the rules that kept his world from falling apart. He should call security. He should have her removed, fired, arrested for trespassing. He should do something, anything, to restore the order she had destroyed. But he didn't move. He stood there, frozen, watching her sleep in the chair that no one else had ever touched. And something strange happened. The pressure behind his eyes didn't intensify. The spiral didn't begin. For the first time in 18 years, the sight of someone violating his sacred space didn't send him into a tailspin. Why? The woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widening in horror as she registered where she was and who was standing over her. She scrambled to her feet so fast she nearly fell, her body colliding with the edge of the desk. Something crashed to the floor. Glass shattered. His phone. His custom-made, limited-edition phone that cost more than most people's cars. It lay in pieces on the hardwood, the screen cracked beyond repair. The woman stared at the wreckage, her face ashen. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Carlos looked at her, then at the phone, then back at her. "Do you know what you've done?" His voice was quiet. Controlled, dangerous. "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out of her in a rush. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I've been working 20 hours straight, and my mother is dying, and I just needed 5 minutes. Please, I'll pay for it. I'll do anything. Just please don't fire me. I need this job. Your mother is dying?" The question cut through her panic. She stopped talking, her breath ragged. "Yes," she whispered. "Cancer. Stage 4. I'm trying to pay for her treatment, but the bills keep coming and I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't keep up." Carlos studied her. The dark circles under her eyes, the tremor in her hands, the way she held herself like someone who had been carrying an impossible weight for far too long. He should fire her. He should call security and have her escorted out and never think about her again. Instead, he said, "How much?" "What?" "The medical bills. How much does your mother owe?" She blinked at him, confused. "Over $200,000. But I don't understand. I'll pay it, all of it, tonight." The woman stared at him like he had just spoken in a language she didn't understand. "In exchange," Carlos continued, his voice flat, businesslike, "you will work for me, full-time, in this penthouse, Until I decide otherwise. I don't... What are you saying? I'm saying that I will save your mother's life, and in return, you will belong to me. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Kara looked at this man, this stranger who held her mother's life in his hands, and understood that she had no choice. She had nothing to bargain with, no cards to play, no way out. Her mother was dying. This man could save her. And all it would cost was Kara's freedom. She closed her eyes, thought of her mother's face, thought of all the years Gloria had sacrificed to give Kara a better life. Then she opened her eyes and looked directly at the billionaire who had just bought her. "Fine," she said. "I'll do it." The phone call took less than 3 minutes. Kara stood in the corner of Carlos's office, watching as he spoke to someone at the hospital in clipped, efficient sentences. Account number, patient name, Gloria Banks, full balance. Yes, all of it. Transfer immediately. When he hung up, he didn't look at her. He simply said, "It's done. Your mother has been moved to a private room. She'll have a dedicated oncologist starting tomorrow." Kara's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of a bookshelf, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. $200,000. Gone. Erased with a single phone call from a man who hadn't even blinked. "Thank you," she whispered, the words feeling inadequate, almost absurd. Carlos finally turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen what you've agreed to." He was right. The penthouse became her prison within 48 hours. Her old apartment was cleared out by movers she never met. Her belongings, what little she had, were placed in a room on the east wing of Carlos's residence. The room was larger than her entire previous home, with a bed that could fit 4 people and windows that looked out over Central Park. It should have felt like an upgrade. Instead, it felt like a cage with a beautiful view. The rules came next. Marcus, Carlos's butler, delivered them with the detached professionalism of someone reading a grocery list. No leaving the penthouse without permission, no phone calls except to her mother, and those would be monitored. No visitors, no questions about Mr. Castellano's personal life, no entering certain rooms without explicit instruction. And the most important rule, Marcus added, his voice dropping slightly, never touch anything belonging to Mr. Castellano without wearing gloves, never move anything from its designated position, and never, under any circumstances, sit in his chair again. Kara understood then what she was dealing with. This wasn't just control. This was obsession. Carlos Castellano didn't just want order. He needed it the way other people needed oxygen. The first week was the hardest. Kara moved through the penthouse like a ghost, careful not to disturb anything, careful not to exist too loudly. She cleaned surfaces that were already spotless. She organized closets that were already perfect. She cooked meals that Carlos barely touched, leaving plates of food sitting untouched for hours until Marcus silently removed them. Carlos himself was a contradiction. He demanded her presence, but rarely acknowledged her. He would sit in his office for hours, working in silence, and Kara would stand nearby, waiting for instructions that never came. Sometimes she caught him watching her from the corner of his eye, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. She hated it. She hated him. She hated the way he had bought her like a piece of furniture, the way he treated her existence as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be respected. But she kept her mouth shut, because every night when she called her mother, Gloria's voice sounded a little stronger. The treatments were working. The doctors were optimistic, and Kara reminded herself that this was why she had agreed. This was the price of her mother's life. The first crack appeared on day 10. Kara was dusting the bookshelves in the study when she accidentally knocked a volume out of alignment. It was barely noticeable, a fraction of an inch, but when Carlos walked in an hour later, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Who moved that?" His voice was sharp, almost panicked. Kara turned, confused. "Moved what?" He pointed at the book. His hand was trembling. That. Someone moved it. It's not where it's supposed to be. She looked at the shelf, then back at him. The book was perhaps a centimeter off from its neighbors. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Carlos looked like he was about to have a heart attack. I did, she admitted. I was dusting. I'm sorry, I'll fix it. Don't touch it. He crossed the room in 3 strides and repositioned the book himself, his movements precise, almost ritualistic. When he was done, he stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, his shoulders rigid with tension. Kara watched him, and something shifted in her chest. Not sympathy, not yet, but recognition. She had seen this before. Her mother had treated patients with anxiety disorders, with OCD, with minds that turned small disruptions into catastrophic threats. Carlos wasn't just controlling, he was suffering, but that didn't excuse what he had done to her. You bought my time, she said quietly. You didn't buy my fear. I won't apologize for existing in your space. Carlos turned to look at her. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Then the mask slid back into place. Just don't move my things, he said, and walked out. The visits to her mother were carefully orchestrated performances. Once a week, a car would take Kara to Mercy General Hospital. She would sit with Gloria for exactly 2 hours, always with a security guard waiting in the hallway. The conversations were monitored. She had been told as much, so Kara learned to lie with a smile. I got a new job, she told her mother during the first visit. Live-in position, great pay. They're giving me room and board. Gloria was sitting up in bed, looking healthier than she had in months. The new treatments had brought color back to her cheeks, but her eyes were sharp, suspicious. Live-in position, Gloria repeated. With who? A businessman. He travels a lot. He needed someone to manage his household. And he's paying for all this? Gloria gestured around the private room. The doctors, the treatments, this fancy room? It's part of the benefits package. Gloria studied her daughter's face for a long moment. Kara kept her expression neutral, praying that her mother wouldn't see through the lies. Kara, Gloria said slowly, if something is wrong, you tell me. You hear me? I don't care how sick I am, I'm still your mother. Nothing's wrong, Mama, I promise. But Gloria didn't look convinced. And when Kara left that day, she felt her mother's eyes following her all the way to the door. The discovery happened on day 23. Kara was asleep in her room when a sound woke her, a crash, followed by ragged breathing. She grabbed her robe and hurried toward the source of the noise, her heart pounding. She found Carlos in the living room, collapsed against the wall. His eyes were wild, unfocused. His hands were pressed flat against the floor, fingers splayed, like he was trying to hold himself to the earth. Every breath came in short, sharp gasps. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. It was 3 in the morning. Kara was the only one there. She should have gone back to her room. This wasn't her problem. He wasn't her responsibility. But something in the way he was shaking, something in the raw terror on his face, made her feet move forward instead of back. Mr. Castellano? She knelt a few feet away, keeping her distance. Can you hear me? He didn't respond. His breathing was getting worse, his body trembling violently. This wasn't just anxiety. This was a full-blown panic attack, the kind that could spiral into something dangerous if left unchecked. Kara had watched her mother talk patients through episodes like this 100 times. She knew the techniques, but she also knew that what Carlos needed right now wasn't words. It was an anchor. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. His skin was cold. His fingers were rigid, locked in place. But the moment her palm touched his knuckles, something changed. His breathing stuttered. His trembling slowed. His eyes, still unfocused, drifted toward their joined hands. Kara held still, barely breathing herself, waiting for him to push her away, to scream at her for touching him without permission. But he didn't. Instead, his fingers slowly relaxed. His breathing deepened. The wild terror in his eyes faded into something quieter, something almost like wonder. "How did you do that?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Do what?" "Make it stop." Kara didn't have an answer. She didn't understand what had just happened any more than he did. All she knew was that for the first time since she had arrived in this penthouse, Carlos Castellano was looking at her like she was more than just a possession. After that night, everything changed. Carlos began requesting her presence more frequently. Not for cleaning, not for cooking, just for proximity. He would work at his desk for hours, and she would sit in a chair across the room, reading or staring out the window. Sometimes he would ask her to hand him documents, to pour his coffee, to perform small tasks that required her to move close to him. And every time she touched something he had touched, every time her hand brushed against his accidentally, she saw the same reaction. The tension in his shoulders would ease, the tightness around his eyes would soften, his breathing would deepen. She was his medication, his antidote, the only person in the world whose presence didn't trigger the obsessive thoughts that plagued him. Kara understood now why he had kept her, not out of cruelty, though the arrangement was cruel, not out of malice, though the power imbalance was malicious. He had kept her because she was the first relief he had found in 18 years. But understanding didn't mean acceptance. She was still a prisoner. She was still bought and paid for, and the fact that her presence helped him didn't erase the fact that she had never been given a choice. "You could just ask me to stay," she said one evening, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for hours. "Instead of trapping me here, you could just ask." Carlos looked up from his papers. His expression was guarded, careful. "Would you have said yes?" Kara considered the question honestly. "No, probably not." "Then you understand why I didn't ask. I understand that you were afraid of hearing no. That's not the same as being right." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or shame. He turned back to his work without responding. But later that night, Kara found a book on her pillow. It was a collection of poetry by Langston Hughes, her favorite, though she had never told him that. There was no note, no explanation, just the book, waiting for her like an apology that couldn't be spoken. She read it cover to cover before falling asleep. The room was always locked. Kara had noticed it during her first week, a door at the end of the east hallway that never opened. Marcus had warned her about it indirectly, mentioning rooms that were off limits without specifying which ones. But it was the only door in the penthouse that required a key, and Carlos never went near it when she was watching. On day 42, she found it open. She was walking past on her way to the kitchen when she noticed the door sitting slightly ajar. Carlos had left for a meeting an hour ago. Marcus was running errands. The penthouse was empty except for her. She should have walked past. She should have pretended she hadn't seen anything. But curiosity had been building for weeks, and now it pulled her forward like a hand on her spine. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small, almost cramped compared to the rest of the penthouse. The walls were covered with photographs, dozens of them, all featuring the same subject. A little girl with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile. The girl on a swing set. The girl blowing out birthday candles. The girl sleeping in a hospital bed, tubes running from her arms. In the corner sat a small table with a single newspaper clipping yellowed with age. Kara moved closer and read the headline. Castellano family tragedy. Daughter dies in house fire. The article was dated 18 years ago. It described a fire that had started in the kitchen of a Long Island mansion, spreading through the house before firefighters could arrive. 2 survivors, Carlos Castellano, 16, and his mother. 1 fatality, Lily Castellano, 7 years old. Kara's stomach dropped. She understood now. The obsessive control, the rigid routines, the terror in his eyes whenever something moved out of place. Carlos hadn't just lost his sister. He had been there when it happened, and he had spent the last 18 years punishing himself for failing to save her. "You shouldn't be in here." His voice came from the doorway, quiet and dangerous. Kara spun around, her heart hammering. Carlos stood at the threshold, his face pale, his hands clenched at his sides. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "The door was open. I didn't mean to." "Get out." "Carlos, I said get out." But she didn't move. She stood her ground, looking at this man who had imprisoned her, who had controlled her, who had treated her like property, and she saw something she hadn't expected to see. She saw herself. "You're not a monster," she said softly. "You're just a man who's been stuck in the worst night of his life for 18 years. His composure cracked, his face contorted, and for a terrible moment, Kara thought he was going to scream at her, throw her out, make her pay for seeing him like this. Instead, he broke. The sound that came out of him was not quite a sob. It was something deeper, more primal, like grief that had been buried so long it had fossilized. He sank against the doorframe, his body shaking, and for the first time since Kara had met him, Carlos Castellano looked like what he truly was, a broken man pretending to be whole. She didn't touch him. She didn't speak. She simply sat down on the floor a few feet away and waited, letting him know without words that she wasn't going anywhere. They stayed like that for a long time. In the room full of ghosts, while the city glittered 40 floors below. Gloria Banks was dying, but she wasn't stupid. Her daughter visited every week with the same practiced smile, the same careful answers, the same obvious lies. And Gloria had spent 30 years as a nurse. She knew when someone was hiding something. On the 8th visit, she decided to stop pretending. "Kara," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "I asked the billing department who's been paying for my treatment." Kara's smile faltered. "Mama, I told you it's—" "Don't!" Gloria's eyes were sharp, fierce. "Don't lie to me, baby. I know it's not some benefits package. I know it's not charity. A man named Carlos Castellano has been paying every single bill since the day you disappeared from your apartment." The color drained from Kara's face. "How did you—" "I asked. I pushed. I made them tell me." Gloria reached out and grabbed her daughter's hand. "Now you're going to tell me the truth. What did you do? What did you give that man in exchange for my life?" Kara tried to speak, but no words came. Her throat had closed up, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. "Baby," Gloria whispered, "did you sell yourself for me?" The dam broke. Kara collapsed against her mother's bed, sobbing like she hadn't sobbed since she was a child. The whole story poured out of her. The exhaustion, the chair, the broken phone, the deal that had cost her everything. When she finished, Gloria was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. "I would rather die than see you live as someone's property. Do you understand me? I would rather die." "Mama." "No. That man used my life to trap you. He used my cancer as a chain around your neck." Gloria's hands were shaking, but her eyes were dry. "I won't be the reason my daughter loses her freedom. I won't." Kara didn't know what to say. She held her mother's hands and cried, knowing that everything was about to change. 3 days later, Carlos received a letter. It was handwritten, delivered by hospital courier, addressed to him personally. He opened it in his office, expecting a legal document or a medical update. Instead, he found Gloria Banks' words staring up at him. "Mr. Castellano, I know what you've done. I know you paid for my treatment, and I know the price you demanded in return. You used my death sentence to buy my daughter. That makes you no better than the men who used to put people like us in chains. Release Kara, now. Or I will tell every newspaper in this city what kind of man you really are. I have nothing left to lose. Do you? Gloria Banks." Carlos read the letter 3 times. Then he set it down on his desk and stared at the wall for a very long time. He had told himself that what he was doing was fair, a transaction, an exchange of value. He had saved a woman's life, and in return, her daughter provided a service. Clean, simple, logical. But Gloria's words cut through every rationalization. You used my death sentence to buy my daughter. That makes you no better than the men who used to put people like us in chains. He thought about Lily, about the night of the fire, about how helpless he had felt, watching his sister slip away while he stood frozen, unable to move, unable to save her. He had spent 18 years trying to control everything because he couldn't control that one moment, and now he had become exactly what he feared most, someone who took freedom from others because he couldn't find it himself. Marcus appeared in the doorway. He had been with Carlos for 10 years. He had seen him at his worst and stood by him anyway. But when he spoke now, his voice was heavy with something that might have been disappointment. "Sir, I've served you faithfully, but what you've done to that young woman is wrong. Her mother is right." Carlos looked up at the only person in the world who had stayed with him through everything. "I know," he said quietly. "I know." Carlos called Kara to his office the next morning. She found him standing by the window, his back to her, silhouetted against the gray Manhattan sky. He didn't turn around when she entered. He didn't acknowledge her presence at all. He simply stood there, staring at the city below, his shoulders carrying a weight she had never seen before. "Your mother wrote to me," he said finally. Kara felt her stomach drop. "I didn't ask her to. I didn't tell her to threaten you." "I know." He turned to face her, and she was struck by how tired he looked. The dark circles under his eyes were deeper than usual. The rigid control that usually defined his features had softened into something that looked almost like defeat. "She's right. About everything." He walked to his desk and picked up an envelope, holding it out to her. Kara didn't move. "What is that?" "Your freedom." His voice was flat, empty. "Inside is a check for $500,000. It's not compensation. Nothing could compensate for what I've done. But it's enough to take care of your mother, to start over, to build a life that I have no part in." Kara stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "I don't understand." "I'm releasing you. No conditions, no strings. You can walk out that door right now, and I will never contact you again." He set the envelope on the desk between them. "I should have done this weeks ago. I should never have done any of this in the first place." She waited for the catch. The hidden clause. The manipulation disguised as generosity. But Carlos just stood there, his hands at his sides, making no move to stop her from leaving. "Why now?" she asked. "Because your mother is right. I used her life to buy you. I told myself it was a fair exchange, a transaction between equals. But there was nothing equal about it. You were desperate, and I exploited that desperation." His jaw tightened. "I've spent 18 years trying to control everything around me because I couldn't control the one thing that mattered. And somewhere along the way, I became the kind of man who takes freedom from others because I can't find it myself." Kara thought about the room full of photographs, the little girl with the gap-toothed smile, the 18 years of guilt and grief and self-punishment that had turned Carlos into what he was. She picked up the envelope and looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at him. "Goodbye, Mr. Castellano," she said. And she walked out. The first week of freedom felt like drowning. Kara moved back in with her mother, who had been transferred to a rehabilitation facility as her condition continued to improve. She slept in a chair beside Gloria's bed, just like she had before all of this started. She ate cafeteria food and drank bad coffee and tried to remember what normal felt like. But normal didn't fit anymore. The world that had made sense before, the endless work, the exhaustion, the desperate scramble for survival, had been replaced by something else, something quieter, something that felt too much like emptiness. She thought about Carlos constantly, not the man who had trapped her, but the man she had seen in that locked room, surrounded by photographs of a sister he couldn't save. The man who had broken down in front of her, letting her see the grief he had hidden from everyone else. The man who had given her a book of poetry without explanation. As if he didn't know how to apologize any other way. She hated that she thought about him. She hated that part of her missed the penthouse, the silence, the strange intimacy of being the only person who could calm his storms. But missing someone wasn't the same as forgiving them, and forgiving wasn't the same as going back. On day 14, Gloria looked at her daughter and said, "You're miserable." Kara tried to deny it, but Gloria cut her off. "Don't lie to me, baby. I've known you since before you were born. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. And every time you think I'm not looking, you stare out that window like you're waiting for someone to appear. I'm fine, Mama. You're not fine. And I think I know why." Gloria reached out and took her daughter's hand. "That man did something terrible to you. But something else happened too, didn't it? Something you haven't told me." Kara didn't answer. She didn't have to. Gloria had always been able to read her like a book. "I'm not saying you should forgive him," Gloria continued. "What he did was wrong. But if there's something real between you, something that isn't about money or debt or control, then you owe it to yourself to figure out what that is. He bought me, Mama, like I was property." "I know. And if he hasn't changed, then you walk away and never look back. But if he has changed, if he's really trying to become someone different, then maybe the question isn't whether you can forgive him. Maybe the question is whether you can live with never knowing." Kara sat with those words for 3 more days. On day 17, she went back to Castellano Tower. The doorman recognized her and let her up without question. The elevator rose 40 floors in silence, and when the doors opened, Kara stepped into a penthouse that felt different than she remembered. The surfaces were still immaculate. The furniture was still perfectly arranged. But there was something softer about the space, something less rigid. A coffee cup sat on the counter, unwashed. A jacket hung over the back of a chair instead of in the closet. Small imperfections that the old Carlos would never have tolerated. She found him in the study, sitting in a chair by the window. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "I didn't expect to see you again," he said finally. "I didn't expect to come back." She walked into the room and sat down across from him, maintaining the same distance she had kept that night when he broke down in front of her. Close enough to be present, far enough to be safe. "I'm not here because I forgive you," she said. "I'm not sure I can forgive you. What you did was wrong, and no amount of money or apologies can undo it." Carlos nodded slowly. "I know. But I also know that you're trying. I can see it in this room. The coffee cup, the jacket. You're letting go, a little bit at a time." "I started seeing a therapist," he admitted. 2 days after you left. First appointment I've had in 18 years. "That's good. That's a start." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that had happened and everything that might still come. "I'm not coming back as your prisoner," Kara said. "I'm not coming back as your employee. If I stay, if I choose to be here, it's on my terms. Equal terms. No debts, no obligations. No one owes anyone anything." "And what would those terms look like?" "You keep going to therapy. You let me come and go as I please. You treat me like a person, not a possession. And if I ever decide to leave for good, you let me go without a fight." Carlos looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I can do that." "Can you?" "Because the man I met 2 months ago couldn't have. The man who trapped me in this penthouse and monitored my phone calls and locked me in a golden cage. He couldn't have let go of anything. I'm not that man anymore." His voice was quiet, but there was something new in it. Something that sounded almost like hope. "I don't know who I am yet, but I know I don't want to be him." Kara studied his face, searching for the manipulation, the hidden agenda, the trap. But all she saw was a man who was trying, imperfectly, painfully, to become someone better. "Then I'll stay," she said. "For now. We'll see what happens." 6 months later, the penthouse no longer felt like a cage. Carlos still had his rituals, his routines, his need for order. But the rigid control had loosened. He could leave a book out of place without spiraling. He could let Kara rearrange the kitchen without losing his mind. The therapy was working, slowly but surely, untangling 18 years of guilt and grief. Gloria Banks was in remission. She lived in a small house in Queens that Kara had bought with her own money, earned from a job she had chosen for herself. They had dinner together every Sunday, and sometimes Carlos joined them, sitting awkwardly at Gloria's table while she studied him with sharp, suspicious eyes that were gradually softening. Kara never forgot what Carlos had done. The memory lived in her like a scar, a reminder of how quickly freedom could be taken away. But scars were also proof of survival, proof that she had endured something terrible and come out the other side. On a quiet evening in autumn, she sat beside Carlos on the balcony, watching the sun set over Manhattan. He reached out and took her hand, and she let him, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. "Thank you," he said softly, "for giving me a chance I didn't deserve." Kara looked at him, this complicated, broken, trying man, and felt something that might have been the beginning of love. "Don't waste it," she said. He didn't, and that's where we'll end today's story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very last word. If this story touched you, made you think, or just gave you a few minutes of escape, leave a comment and let me know what part stayed with you the most. And if you haven't already, subscribing really does help more than you know. Until next time, take care of yourselves.